see if we can also monitor any of the questions. Boom.
Live streaming is enabled. That means we are live with a very serious session with we've got Ryan and Denny. I'm waiting to see if QP will join us for a committers AMA and happy hour. I was just lamenting to Denny that I don't have any beer, so my happy hour is a little less happy, but it will. I have a water here, so it will be hydrating. So we'll see how it goes. Denny, I said I called it a committer's happy hour, but I don't know if I've ever seen you actually commit to.
That's actually a good point, because I don't think I've committed code into even Spark for at least maybe 4 years ago. I think that's the last time that I've actually committed actual code. That's true. Yeah, I think at this point, the most I'm committing are documentation or something like that.
Hey, those are still good commits.
No, I don't disagree with that. I'm not knocking it, but it's a valid point that you're bringing up. That I'm like, I don't think I've actually written any code for a while. Sort of sucks.
So Ryan, I mean, I know who you are. I know what you're working on, but where are you committing in the Delta Lake project?
So basically, I basically start work with Michael, who is the author of the Delta Lake, which basically at the beginning. So I made a lot of commits to the Delta Lake, in the past several years. And in addition, I'm also a Apache Spark committer, which also contribute hundreds of commits to Apache Spark in the past. Yeah, and then now I'm basically focused on Delta sharing, which is a new open source project we are currently working on.
I want to pull up. I'm gonna pull up two graphs.
Okay.
Because so let me share my window here to give anybody watching an idea. So here's Ryan. This is the Delta main repository for Delta. There's Barack, who's number 1, and then Ryan here at number 2 in terms of committers, getting lots of commits in lately. Unfortunately, I can't go back more than a couple of months here. But then Delta sharing. This is the last couple of months with Delta sharing. Totally Ryan.
Yeah.
So,
we also
Mateo's there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mateo was there. So let me ask you, Ryan, with Delta sharing. I mean, a lot of it was coming together sort of in the final weeks before Data and AI Summit where y'all announced it.
Yeah.
Were there any features or any things that you had to cut to make the deadline that you're looking forward to bringing in now that Data and AI Summit is over?
Yeah. So basically, because we actually just had only several weeks before Data. So basically, we was basically focusing on the major features like Python connector and also a Spark connector that can read from this Delta sharing server, and the open source Delta sharing server currently right now is kind of a reference implementation, which supports the major features. But regarding security or other optimizations, we actually haven't spent quite a lot on this part. And for the open source client, there are also a lot of pieces we can improve in the future. Currently, we can for example, if you are using that Delta Lake, the transaction log may contain a file state, and then currently the client actually doesn't use these file states to do data skipping, so to provide a fast performance. Yeah, there are a lot of work we still need to work on in this project. It's just we are just basically before
at the beginning.
Yeah, just kind of at the starting stage. Yeah.
Making some notes for questions I want to ask later. But I want to give.
So Ryan, then we can probably can't just jump out of the call right now when he starts.
Like, all right, Tyler's questions. Oh, I gotta go. See you later.
Yeah, sorry. Fire drill right now, just right this second.
I guess on the topic of delta sharing, because I'm super interested in where it's gonna go. I mean, Denny, you're more than welcome to jump in, but Ryan, as the main committer to delta sharing, I feel like is the star of the show here at the moment.
Not it. Yeah, just yeah. Go ahead. I'm out. I'm gonna leave. Bye.
I'm interested, Ryan, to know like where you imagine this going. Like Delta itself has all of these features like time travel. There's writer support as well, and delta sharing right now is very reader oriented, but it's sort of like a single snapshot in time of a data set. How much of like what we see in Delta as sort of like support or compatibility do you think is going to come over into delta sharing?
So maybe we can use some example like time travel, like you mentioned. Let's definitely we can support this easily in this delta sharing. We can extend the kind of protocol, like you can specify a table version in the request, and then we can support this. And another like other features like currently we only allow you to share the latest the version of table, and then in future we also would like to allow you to specify you would like to share a specific version of the table, and the user should not be able to see other versions, something like this.
So I'm trying to think of a good way to ask this, but is delta sharing just going to become sort of delta over HTTP? Or are there things that you think right now are like, no way, we wouldn't add this to delta sharing, excuse me.
So currently maybe something we probably won't be able to support is like the writing. Because in our current security model, actually we don't have a great way to allow a user to write to share the table. But at least we are kind of default this until it's really become like a necessary. So we will focus on like the reading part first, because we still have a lot of work to do in the reading part. So, but the writing probably will be something we will consider in future. Gotcha. It's not that we will drop, but it's we don't have enough resource right now to build a list.
Is that something that you have ideas written down to where if somebody from the Delta Lake community wanted to go implement the writer side of that in the reference server, you would? Or is it something that you just haven't even started to wrap your head around how it would work?
Yeah, I haven't started to think about this into the details. Yeah, there are a lot of the security questions I need to think about how to solve.
Yeah, one of the things that QP and Christian and Misha and Neville from the Delta RS community have spent a lot of time thinking about are concurrency challenges, because having multiple writers on top of something like S3, there are challenges. So when we, if you look maybe like a year down the road when we're talking about Delta sharing having writer support, I imagine we'd have a lot of those same conversations about concurrency and whose right wins.
Right. That's a hard problem.
I was telling QP this morning or Christian this morning, I really would like to stop thinking or having to think about coordination and concurrency problems with Delta for a little while.
Maybe AWS can support put a percent feature on S3, then this is much easier to do.
I agree. I would much rather AWS just solve this problem for us.
Well, they've been slowly adding more consistency features, right? Over time. So it's the only one that's left is the put for the absence. No seriousness.
Put if absent, that's the operation.
Yeah, it's like a conditional right.
Conditional.
Yeah. Basically, for other large cloud providers, they already have this. So
QP has joined. I don't know if you were there and see or hear us.
Yes, I was being late. I missed the calendar.
No problem. So QP, we were just talking about Delta sharing, and that sort of led us into some of the concurrency fun that we've had in Delta RS. Since you joined, I want to make use of your time. Let me ask you a question. For anybody that doesn't know who QP is, QP is the original creator and committer on Delta RS, which he created last year. QP, I'm kind of curious where you think Delta RS goes over the next, let's say, 6 to 12 months.
Wow, that's a tough question.
Let me ask it differently. Where do you want it to go?
So obviously the most important thing is to get it into production, a script. So we have a pretty cool project, Kafka Delta Ingest. I think that's the first goal that I would like to see happen. And then after that, I think there are a couple interesting use cases that could come out of it. For example, we have been talking about, mostly Tyler, have been talking about using Lambda to do some cool Delta Lake related hacking. One of those relates to using Lambda to automatically archive data in Delta table for cost savings and auditing purposes. So I think there are a couple interesting applications that could come out of it with Lambda and Rust.
I feel like sometimes with these ideas that I'll have, I feel like I'm a toddler who's like, why can't we do this? But what about that? What if we did this? Would that work? And then QP's like, well, yeah, maybe. And I feel like I'm spending far less intellectual time thinking about how possible it is. I'm just like, what if we did it like this?
Yep. And another pretty cool.
And this is QP showing his political acumen on how to answer this question.
Another pretty cool application I think that could come out of that is so we can now easily create language bindings for almost any language we want with very little effort, right? So one of the things that in Python so far it's been pretty good because we have a pretty we have pandas library which is really useful that we can do all kinds of advanced query with data table already in Python, but that is not the case for other languages like Ruby, for example. And we've been thinking of exposing Rust data fusion project for these other languages so that they can also query data tables with really high performance query engine. So
you've been working on data fusion a bit lately. I think it may be a lesser known project. Could you maybe introduce it?
Yeah. So
Denny's Googling it right now.
So data fusion, it's basically a query execution engine, analytical query execution engine based on Arrow, the Arrow in memory format. And it's sort of similar to pandas for Python, but it's for Rust or in Rust. And it implements the same set of data frame API. And then on top of that, it provides a SQL query interface for you to query any kind of tabular data or that in any language, well, in Rust. But the cool thing about that is because it's in Rust, so it's really easy to export the same query interface and APIs to other languages. So.
Data fusion doesn't do anything distributed, though, right?
It does not. There is a project, but that's still like in early development phase. But right now, it's only local.
So it's closer, like I think of Apache Spark, sort of at the high end of like distributed query execution stuff.
Yep.
Data fusion is closer to pandas.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
I actually don't know if pandas can be distributed or not.
I don't think so natively, but there are, yeah. But Databricks has a pandas distributed abstraction, right? So people can use the same API to run it on Spark.
Yeah.
That's part of the
called. Yeah. And we actually also like merging this project to Apache Spark, so you will get this
That's a really cool
in
project.
Spark.
Oh,
Yeah.
Koalas is going into Apache Spark.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
That was
cool.
that was actually announced during the Spark Day 2 keynotes that that we're merging the koalas into it actually. So
Cool. Denny, how about you? What do you want to see coming up?
what I want to see coming up.
You talk to silly people like me all the time, so
Yeah,
surely you've
yeah.
got a wish list.
Well, are you talking about Delta sharing, or are you talking about Delta Lake, or I'm just curious, what's the context?
Say anything under the Delta Lake project umbrella.
Okay, fair enough. Well, then, for me, it's we've got a lot of people who are asking or interested in various connectors, like Flink, Presto, whatever else, and so we've actually even started various channels on the Delta Lake Slack channel to go ahead and talk about that. And in fact, that's probably what I would love to have more involvement within, the Flink community, the Presto community, Kafka communities, all these other communities that really want to. It's not just about them telling us, "Hey, we'd love to see it." It's like, no, we'd love to go ahead and actually sit down and engage more. And so it's starting to happen. Like I said, so we've started placing some channels in Delta Lake specifically for that. But love to see, since we've got a nice, promotion vehicle here right now, right? Love to actually have more people involved. We'll be starting once every 2-week meetings, I believe, in I want to say early July. That's when we're starting those meetings. Yeah, I think the Flink one we've already it will start at the end of this month. In fact, actually, the Presto one I think it's supposed to start at the beginning of next month. But yeah, so we're going to start doing more and more of things like that. That's definitely on my wish list. So
yeah, Delta Lake everywhere. That's the plan.
Absolutely, from a quote from you, no less.
What? You
yes.
should not be listening to me, Denny.
I know. That's why do you think I have to drink copious amounts of coffee so I can remember what I should and should not be listening to you
about? We have a question from the chat, and I think this is probably for you, QP. Does Delta RS expose the history and describe APIs just like the JVM version of Delta Lake?
We have that in all parsed in memory, but we don't have API to expose that yet. There is a GitHub issue on that. It's actually really good for first-time contributors. It's really easy to add that API. We just have to expose what we have in memory through API.
All right, I'm gonna have to go dig up that issue now. One of our good first issues. One of the things I'll just call out here. There's a lot of good first issues linked for Delta RS. Ryan, have y'all done that for the Delta repo as well? Gone and tagged issues that are like beginner or introductory things?
Yeah, we have some special tags. Actually, right now we have like on-call duty for OS Delta Lake, which we will have people start looking at the monitor this report, and then try to bring great issues or pull requests. And then we will discuss this every day to see what we can do to improve the community. For example, if we find something like a simple issue, I will probably just add some tag there. And if something is pretty hard, but if someone would like to contribute, we will discuss offline about what we should do for some larger features. Yeah, does this answer your question?
Got it. Yeah. There's when I look at the Delta repository, there are 136 issues there.
Yeah.
And then in Delta RS, we recently crossed 40.
Yeah.
And so between the two of them, I think we have lots of opportunity for contribution.
Yes, and you haven't included connectors, by the way, which is its own set. That's right. Connectors has its own set of PRs and issues. And so we actually did start tagging connectors, and then Summit happened, so we're a little slow on tagging the core one. So we will catch up starting next week. We will start
next week.
Catching up next week. Yes.
I feel like I've heard that before. Next week we'll get to this. Next week.
Yes. What's great about these type of recordings, the next week could be based off of whatever
Yeah.
date you watch this video.
Whenever you watch this video, it's next week.
Exactly. It's next week.
Let me go back to my list of questions. Again, if you've got any questions, you're welcome to throw them in the YouTube chat, and we'll see what we can do to answer them. Maybe, Denny, something that you might be willing to share, or maybe not, we'll see. But I'm curious, let's say over the past year or so, like what's the coolest use of Delta Lake that you've seen that you were able to talk about publicly?
I think the coolest use in some ways is actually almost pretty boring, right? So the reason I say that is because a lot of this has to do with I can't mention the company, but I can definitely mention the use case. And so the use case actually is very much GDPR. And in fact, if you do a bunch of YouTube stuff, you probably will find the company.
What was that acronym?
Oh, sorry, GDPR, compliance.
GDPR. Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, GDPR, yeah. So for compliance use cases, where because they needed the ability to delete, merge, update, things of that nature. And so, for example, the way they did compliance actually wasn't just deleting the information, but was actually updating the information first, because that way they could ensure that their downstream systems could also comply properly with TCP and GDPR. And then finally they would delete afterwards. But the context was that first was an update, and that would signal and that would trigger a bunch of downstream systems. And in the process of doing that, because people are saying, oh, well, how can you do update? It ended up involving a bunch of data warehousing techniques. So in other words, your surrogate keys, slowly changing dimensions, type 2 slowly changing dimensions. A lot of the traditional data warehousing type techniques are actually basically applied within Delta Lake. And so that part I find sort of cool, just because I'm an old data warehousing hound, and the idea that my old data warehousing knowledge actually is applicable to the new world today is actually pretty sweet. So
I'm sure
so
that's
boring,
yet
also cool. Yes, it's exactly. You did say cool for me as opposed to exactly cool for me as opposed to just cool in general. Right? So, yeah. So there you go.
It's a subjective judgment.
So that tells you how boring I am, minimally enough. But still, there's your answer. So.
Ryan, I don't know how much you get to be exposed to customer or user use cases in the Delta community. So the same question, right? Like, have you seen something cool lately that made you particularly excited?
Yeah, one thing, like for example, in the past we saw like some customers that have like very like big tables, and then before Delta, actually the query is very slow, because when you are querying this metadata, you need to like read from Hive meta store, and then fetching this like from like a database is pretty slow. And then after we let's switch to Delta Lake, all of these metadata are kind of become files on the file system, like on S3. And then we use Spark, which is safe to speed up all these metadata operations. So, and if you have enough resource, let's say you can like start like a 100 node to process like a table that have billions of files. And this is impossible when before Delta, which if you have 1 billion files in a store, this metadata in Hive meta store, it would be very slow. Or it may be impossible.
Yeah, you still have to you have to maintain. You also have to operate Hive meta store to make sure it's not going down, right?
Yeah, right.
So extra things to manage.
I'm pretty sure that is the challenge.
Yeah,
keeping it up.
Yeah, right.
QP, how about you? Same question.
So I keep going back to Kafka Delta Stream because I think we are also sort of stress testing the transaction action in Delta protocol, where I think we might be the first application that try to create one transaction application per Kafka partition to keep track of the Kafka ingestion progress within Delta table itself.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it will go well, but so far we're pretty happy with the design. Yeah, we'll see how it goes in production. It's working well so far.
Let me go to a question that came in through chat. Maybe, Denny, you mentioned connectors. Could you maybe just introduce what connectors is and why that repository exists and what's supposed to go there?
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for the question, actually. So the point of the connectors repository is the ability for systems, different systems, like to be able to interact with Delta Lake, right? We want to make sure that it's easy for when the project started. Like, we definitely started with Spark, right? And so let's not bother the pretense that we haven't done that, right? But the reason we wanted the connectors is because interacting with Delta Lake and utilizing the advantages of ACID transactions for your data lake with Delta Lake is not specifically a Spark project, right? It can be anything, right? Doesn't matter what language you're using, doesn't matter what distributed platform you're using. And so connectors is basically the repo that allows us to put a bunch of these connectors inside there, connection points, whether it's like SQL Delta import. Yes, I know I'm the blocker for that PR, Tyler and QP.
I wasn't going to say anything.
No, I'm calling it. I'm calling myself out. So I got no problem. That's me. It's on me. So I own this. Okay. Power BI connectors, for example, there are pull requests for a Presto connector right now that is currently being worked on. Obviously, the stuff that Ryan has created, the Hive connectors, JVM standalone, the Delta native standalone reader, things of that nature. So we'd like. This is just one repo, though, right? We actually have many connectors that can talk to Delta, and both from right now, mostly primarily on read, but we're actually working closely with the community, including teams like yourselves, for also writing capacity. And so the whole premise is that the protocol, everything is open sourced, everything, you can all review it, read it, and interact with it. And actually, a call out to both Tyler and QP, they corrected and updated our protocol even. So.
I think the once as QP was alluding to, once Kafka Delta ingest is live and in production, I'm hoping we don't have to do anything, but I can imagine us having some feedback on how the Texan actions or transaction actions are handled in the Delta protocol.
But that's the awesome thing about open source projects. It's to get all that feedback and combine it in. It gives us more work, but still.
Let me go back to my list of questions. Thank you all for those answers. Ryan, let me come back to you with this question. We've got, I think right now, from what I've seen, I think reader and writer versions are just at 1.
Yep.
Like, what would be, let's say we're evolving the protocol. What do you think would be significant enough to require us to actually make use of that min reader or min writer version in the Delta protocol?
So in the past, actually, we had made some writer version change. So for example, recently we added a generated column feature, which allow the user to define an expression for a column, and then we automatically generate this value when you write to the table. In this case, we bump this writer version because the older version won't be able to understand how to generate these values just based on this expression. For the reader version part, which we haven't done any change in the past, but in future we may bump this. For example, if we would like to support hidden columns, we would like to allow the user to specify, okay, I don't want to show this column in the table. This is just some metadata, something like this. In this case, we will need to bump this reader version. So the auto version cannot read them because they will return a different answer.
Gotcha. How do you, I would like to hear from you, Ryan, and QP on this. We now have 3 implementations of the Delta Lake protocol, one in Rust, one in that standalone Java project, and then in the Spark reference implementation. How are we going to coordinate changes to the protocol?
So,
what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, so basically, if you like to change the protocol, then first I think it's better to discuss in the Delta core project, which you may just open a pull request, a change to the protocol, and then we can discuss there what you like to change and how can we coordinate this with other projects. So yeah, depends on what you propose. Yeah.
I was going to ask the same question, but good to know. I thought the process was to send an email to the dev mailing list, but I think just to summarize, the process should be starting with the PR, right? With the proposed change to the protocol.
Yeah,
file.
you can also send an email if that's just simple. But if you have like a very complicated case, maybe also just try to like modify this protocol doc so we can have a better idea of what you are going to change.
I'm actually quite interested to see how this evolves over the next 6 to 12 months, because we have a lot of versions of things now.
Yeah.
There's the Spark implementation version, there's the standalone reader, and then the Delta RS has its own versioning, and we don't have any shared understanding right now of Delta Lake is 1.0. We said that at Data in AI Summit. But we don't have, I would say, a consistent means of communicating what protocol version each of these tools is actually tied to. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody comes off the street and says, "I'm going to grab the Delta Lake Python package," which Florian helped really create, there's nothing that really tells them right now that that's compatible with a Delta Lake 1.0, table. Other than the metadata that's actually in the table itself, right? So I see that as a challenge that we're going to have to figure out, before the next Data in AI Summit.
Yeah, probably a good idea. I mean,
I think we can also like have a document or a document page to describe all these compatibility like issues or at least what we support in each version.
Yeah. Denny, you were going to say something?
Yeah, perfect. No, good call up by Ryan for starters, but thanks. The context I was saying is that we're taking the inspiration from the Delta REST API twice monthly meetings, or once every 2 weeks. And so same idea that we want to start that process for the Delta Core, where we can actually have more open discussions about the protocol. So in addition to the document, I feel that's a good way for us to make sure everybody's on the same page, that we actually just have more discussions on this, because there's also different interpretations of what the protocol is doing, right? We've been talking to plenty of, just like you guys, right? We've been talking to plenty of other partners about how they want to use Delta, and what ultimately happens, like there was a different, even though we're all reading the same words, it was a different, based on the context, it was a different interpretation of what we meant versus what they meant. So having regular conversations of this, I think will help go us a long way as well. So
having our, I would say, regular meetings of the implementers certainly would go a long way to making sure we don't screw anything up. Right now, and I don't know if QP you feel that there's any different or anything different here, but from Delta RS, I kind of feel like we just are sort of chasing behind the Spark implementation.
Yeah, I agree.
If something doesn't work in Delta RS, we just say, or it doesn't work in Delta RS and it works in Spark, then we have to go figure out like how to make that work. But we're not. I don't think. Actually, QP, are we Delta 1.0 compatible in Delta RS right now?
So 1.0, there's a couple features that's out of scope for Delta RS. For example, reading. There's a new feature where people can specify dynamic columns.
The generated columns.
Yeah. So reading generated columns is out of scope for Delta RS.
Yeah, actually, that's the right feature. So for the reader part, there should not be any change.
Oh, okay. I guess.
Because we actually store the values of this column in the table. So when you are reading this table, there's nothing you need to change.
Okay, I get it. So yeah, makes sense. We're behind on that.
Okay, almost. We're Delta 0.99 compatible. Not quite there. So just to be respectful of Ryan, Denny, and QP's time, I could talk all day, but let's give it a couple more minutes. If you've got any questions, please dump them in the YouTube chat. If you've got questions, if this is no longer live and you're watching this through YouTube, you can go to delta.io and scroll to the bottom. There's the link to the Slack workspace. you can join the Delta Lake OSS channel there, or the Delta RS channel, or a myriad of other connectors channels that Denny was suggesting earlier, if you've got further questions about those tools. I keep coughing. Sorry, excuse me. Denny, take the wheel.
No problem. Well, thank you very much for everybody for joining today's session. Should I just cancel it now? No.
No.
Dang it! Oh, man.
Gotta earn your pay, buddy.
Fair enough. So stay hydrated, Tyler. If you're going to be doing this, you got to stay hydrated. That's why I have coffee.
A key part of the AMA.
Exactly. Come on, man. Stay hydrated.
Maybe I'll ask this of you, QP. Are you hacking on anything interesting for Delta Hack?
So I'm planning to. So previously, to back on this, we're working on this multi-writer for S3 support, right? Which you all were talking about lack of access to atomic rename in S3. So we have a design that we sort of partially approved with TLA Plus, and during that process, I found a lot of problems. It's actually not a really easy thing to use. So last week, I found a really cool project on Hacker News called State Right. It's a similar project to TLA Plus, where it lets you do model checking with any distributed system design, and it will exploit all the possible states and help you find edge cases or race conditions. So I'm planning to use that with Delta RS. The nice thing about State Right is it also lets you specify the spec within your implementation. So it makes sure that the spec is always up to date with the implementation, and I think that's something that's not possible to do in TLA Plus. So I'm pretty excited to learn more about the project and see if we can adopt it for Delta RS.
Cool. What TLA Plus does and what States Right does, that's not formal verification, right? What's the concept? Or is that formal?
Yeah, it's formal verification, yes.
Okay. Cool. Is the Spark implementation formally verified, Ryan?
Yes, sorry, I am a little bit lost. Yeah.
So it's I'm pretty sure it's not because that would be too much thing to verify. But I guess verification of the delta write itself, the writing to delta table, that the whole optimistic concurrency control, that can be formally verified as well.
Yeah, maybe so you mean how to test this feature? You mean?
So it's more about formally writing out the design for delta table, so that we can automatically catch all the edge cases without writing a unit test. It's more like writing mathematical proof for the design, so that we have a system to check the proof to make sure that the proof is correct.
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, right now we don't have such check. It's kind of but every time when we try to make changes to this, like transaction conflict detection, we need to go through many senior engineers to review what you would like to change, because it is the core part of the correctness of the table. Yep.
And that's the problem I've been struggling as well. It's really hard to think about correctness in a distributed system design. So having tools like this really helps.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah, when I first saw that TLA Plus work that you did, QP, I was very surprised that someone would voluntarily do that in their free time.
Well, I started the work without knowing much about TLA Plus, so knowing what would have happened, I probably wouldn't have done it.
So let's hope. What's it called? State
Right.
State Right. Okay. Neat. Ryan, how about you? Anything cool you're hacking on coming up soon?
No, actually, I kind of working on like
taking a break.
Delta sharing server in Databricks. Yeah, we have like an open source server, but in order to like make this working in Databricks, there are a lot of like work I need to do. Yeah, because we have like a different like environments, like
right.
product. So we need to. It's kind of probably I need to write a lot of code, to support our like infrastructure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think the lambdas that QP pointed out earlier. That's my answer to this question.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what are you going to work on?
I've got to put my money where my mouth is on those. Writing lambdas is so fun in Rust. I don't know. They're so simple. All right, I should go ahead and wrap this up so that we can all get back to our respective day jobs or hacking or what have you. Ryan, thank you so much for your time. QP, Denny, also thank you so much for your time. If you've got further questions about Delta Lake or where the project is or where it's going, definitely join us in our Slack workspace or the Delta users Google group. Both of those are linked from delta.io. And yeah, I guess come join us. Delta Lake's a fun project to work on. And thank you all for joining me. I'll see you all later.
Thank you.
Bye.